Okay, so welcome everyone. It's the 22nd of March 2021. It's a sort of celebration for the 22nd anniversary of the Lazarus Consultancy Ltd. Thank you all for being here. And it's going to be very informal, 2.5 hours, and I won't be doing all the talking. So there's going to be lots of breakout rooms, just so you can sort of, you know what I'm like. I want to impart knowledge as part of what I'm about. And so part of imparting knowledge is that you get a chance to think about it and how you're going to use it in your life. Hi, Gavin. Hi, Francis. So Sebastian's joining. So in terms of how things are going to go, so this is very much an open frame. What I want to do is just open it up to you. Hi, Seb. So what questions you have? Ideally, the first probably hour and a bit would be around sort of like my core activities in terms of NLP coaching and sport. But then after that will be sort of more business stuff as well in terms of selling and leadership and management. And I'm happy to answer questions pretty much in any order. So who would like to start with the first question on any topic? And I'll do my best to answer it. And I want to say, the answer I'm going to give is my best knowledge at this moment in time, and I reserve the right to change my opinion at some point in the future, and for other people to have different opinions to mine, and I'm totally fine with that. So, John, question. Hiya.
Gentlemen, let's start. Okay. What is your key to success?
My key to success.
Mm-hmm. What would you say is the key to success?
Well, okay, so I don't want to make it about me. I want to make it generally. So what I've observed in the last 22 years of this work, people who are successful, it's a few key things really. And from an NLP point of view, it could come back to the principles for success for those of you who studied NLP with me. So I think the first thing is knowing what you want, having an outcome. And I don't think it necessarily, in the short term, I think it has to be relatively clear. Longer term, I think it can be some ideas, a direction of where you want to go, almost like a purpose or a mission, because that I think is what's going to keep anyone motivated over the long term. So people can have short-term goals and achieve it and be motivated in the short term, a month, 3 months, 6 months, maybe a year, but going 5, 10, 15, 20 years, 50 years down the line, I think it's helpful for people if they've got a real mission, a real drive. So knowing what they want and being clear why they want it, and it's in alignment with who they are. So if I look at, my interest in sports, if I look at someone like, and I've never met these people, by the way, so I'm just an observer to this, the way probably all of us are, someone like Cristiano Ronaldo, whether you like him or don't like him, the guy is seriously successful. And I can remember reading up when he was at Manchester United many years ago, he was a real nuisance in that, so I'm just turning my printer off. Let's make a noise here. He was a nuisance in that he would be asking the coaches all the time, what do I do to improve? How can I improve my technique? How can I improve my strength? How can I improve my tactical awareness? He was totally focused on what he wanted to achieve. So I would say that's a really, really important factor. And look at business people as well who are successful. They've got it's not just about the money, it's about the difference they're going to make. Look at, for example, Bill Gates. Again, I've never met the guy, but he just keeps going and going because and it's beyond just making money, it's making a difference, a charitable foundation, etc. That's as far as I can see from the outside, from what I read in the press. So I think that's a key thing, John. I think there's also things like having a positive mindset around there's no failure, only feedback. So when I wrote one of my books, I did some research on people who were inverted commas successful, and a lot of them had been inverted commas non-successful at some point. I think, and this is, so I'm only repeating what I read on the internet, I don't know how true it is, but for example, I think it was Bill Gates, his first business, for one of his early business ventures, was called Trafo Data. And it didn't work. Business didn't work. I think Walt Disney had business non-successes, but they, the old NLP presupposition of this no failure, only feedback. Hi, Bob. No failure, only feedback. So having that positive mindset, and also for those of you who've either studied with me or studied NLP, the idea of being at cause. In other words, having a really totally positive mindset that recognizes that even if things don't go well, we can change our perspective on it. We can change what we do, which in the long term will get us better results. John, does that answer your question? And there's probably some other factors as well, but I think those are some of the key factors, I think. So mission, have a goal, totally focused, overcome hurdles and problems along the way, and work well with people.
Here, it served you well for 22 years, so it must work.
I'm not saying I've done it, and I think I have to an extent. And I'm not saying I'm successful. I love what I do. I'm blessed. I love what I do. Those of you who know me, I love what I do. It's a passion of mine. And, you know, I want to keep doing this as long as I can talk and think, basically. Okay. And by the way, I know some of you need to drop in and out of this. It's absolutely fine. The fact you're here is fantastic. And there'll be other people coming and going during the day. So that's great. So thank you. Other questions, folks?
I have one.
Hey, Francis.
Hi, Jeremy, and congratulations.
Thank you.
So my question, I just tried to formulate it. So let me just say it and see how I can put it together.
Okay.
I was curious, in the last 22 years, what identity changes have you gone through? What new beliefs have you taken on, and what values have you changed? I think they're all related in a kind of, yeah. I know it's a big abstract question.
Yeah. So identities, things like an accountant. I changed from being an accountant to being an NLP or a coach and then an NLP trainer. I mean, on one level, I'm who I am. I am who I am. So at a deep level, I don't think I've changed necessarily. But I think, you know, I've had more different mantles. So things like becoming a trainer of NLP and then a master trainer of NLP, becoming an author. I mean, I never thought I'd do that. And so in some ways, there's different I am statements, which I could have attributed to myself. I think what has helped me, can I say this? Yeah, I'll say it, doesn't matter. So when I became a master trainer of NLP in 2008, without going into details, it was a bit controversial. It ruffled a few feathers in the industry. And one of my colleagues who was involved in that journey with me, who was also in a similar situation, she said that instead of holding master trainer at identity level, she just held it at capability level. In other words, the fact that people were ruffling her feathers about this, in fact, it didn't ruffle her feathers because it didn't touch her as much as it touched me, because I held it at identity level initially. So I changed that. So I think generally for people, our titles may change. We may get promoted. We may there'll be life changes and career changes. I think if we stay true to who we are, and I know there'll be some certain identity, what's called identity events, like becoming a parent or becoming a husband or wife or a grandparent. So those I think are more personal, and I think that's different. But outside, in terms of work, I think to stay true to who we are, I think who we are won't necessarily change that much. And to keep that alignment with who we are, our mission, vision, purpose, and then with our capabilities, adapt our capabilities, learn new skills to fit what we want to achieve, to fit the goals we want to achieve. In terms of values, I don't think fundamentally it shifted. I think it's important to me to make a difference. It's important to me to make money as a business. It's important to me to be to help people as much as I can. So, and I imagine that for other people, that whilst aspects of their life may change, I think if they stay true to who they are, it helps. So that's my best thinking at the moment, Francis. Does that answer your question? Thank you. other questions, folks. And by the way, I'm going to just, you know, I'm going to be putting you into breakout groups as we go through this. It's not going to be me talking for the next whatever 2.5 hours, because I would want you to be able to take something valuable for yourselves away from this. I don't want this to be about me. I want it to be about you. And one way we can do that is for you to be able to be clear for yourself what you've learned and how you could put it into practice. And it's totally okay with me if you think what I'm saying doesn't apply to you or is incorrect. I'm totally cool with that. Okay. Avina.
You have a lot of experience in NLP and using all the different techniques, trainer, up to master. Do you find, and this might be a question to everybody who uses NLP, do you find that you tend to use as many of the techniques as you've learned and know, or do you find you stick to the same, there's this kind of theme, whether you do coaching in sport, whether you do coaching in business, everything, is there?
Sorry, Avina, you've put yourself on mute.
Sorry, it's
okay.
Too sensitive.
Yeah,
So yeah, do you find there's a theme that you kind of tend to use the same ones, or do you feel that you use all of them? I know for myself, I'm more comfortable with some than others, so I tend to use them more. But I'm wondering whether you have so much knowledge of it, and do you find you use all of them more?
Okay, so I suppose I use all of them at some point over 22 years. What I'd say is that I think there's a few key inverted commas techniques. I don't want to get hung up on techniques necessarily. There's a few key NLP interventions, tools, techniques, which seem to be more prevalent, particularly with the kind of clients I see. So things like reframing. That's one of the biggest things I do, just reframing conversationally. I'm not doing swish patterns and all these techniques all the time. Often I will reframe. I think perceptual positions, seeing other perspectives, whether I do it in the, and I know some of you may not have studied NLP, so I'll briefly explain each of these aspects. So perceptual positions is seeing other perspectives, putting yourself in your shoes, the other person's shoes, and a neutral perspective. It's a brilliantly useful technique, not just for the standard uses of NLP, but for standard conflicts or misunderstandings, but selling and managing people. So I use perceptual positions both in its traditional sense where you move the client around, and also I use it conversationally. If you're advising someone else over there, what advice would you give them? Which is, for those of you who know about NLP, it's taking them into position 3. Hi, everyone who's just joined. I haven't said loads of staff, Marjorie, Christine, Gary, Zahida. So welcome. So I think, perceptual positions, values, I think it's really useful in terms of making choices, motivating people, managing staff. It's brilliantly useful for that. Also, I think with sport in particular, I'll use anchoring, circle of excellence. So anchoring is helping people get into a really good state, almost at the click of their fingers. Because I think with sports in particular, at some point, people may feel nervous or over motivated. They need to manage their states. I think it's a major aspect of sport. I know some of you actually work quite a lot with athletes. So those are some of the main techniques. And obviously goal setting, of course, how can I forget that goal setting? So those, I would say, are things which with most people I'm going to use because it's conversational kind of work. So yeah. Avina, does that answer your question? Great. I'll take one more question, then I'll put you into a breakout group. Mark, I can see your hand up.
Good morning, Jeremy.
Hi, Mark. Hiya.
I'm very curious to know your thoughts on beliefs. So I understand that there's some iceberg beliefs. We don't always know what they are until we bump into them. And that belief, together with the environment we're in, shapes massively our perhaps our thinking and therefore our responses and decisions and actions, and therefore the outcomes that we achieve. So there's two questions in my mind. One was, I originally thought you could change beliefs, but now I'm more persuaded that actually it's probably better to live with your beliefs and acknowledge in some ways that they can drive behaviors which are useful and resourceful to you, but in other ways, those behaviors, perhaps if overdone, they can slow you down and hold you back and stop you. And so I was wondering what your thought was around when you're working with an athlete who has these strongly ingrained iceberg beliefs. Instead of getting them to change them, maybe it's to accept and acknowledge them, because to change your beliefs is to change who you are, and that's tough, that's hard. And so maybe it's better to acknowledge them and accept where they're helping you and focus on that, but also to be aware of when they can get in the way. But what are your thoughts on that?
Okay, so firstly, thanks for that question, Mark. So one of the things I'm thinking of doing is to run a workshop, at least a one-day workshop on beliefs and belief change, because I think it's a massive subject.
Oh, okay.
So I'm going to endeavour to answer that question in about 5 minutes. So, beliefs, I think, are massively important in the results that we achieve in life. If we have empowering beliefs, then generally that's going to help us to move forward, and disempowering beliefs hold us back. And sometimes people don't know about what their disempowering beliefs are, their limiting beliefs. Some people just don't know what they are because they're quite deep. So you said, Mark, that someone's beliefs are tied up with who they are. I would seek to challenge that if I was working with a client who had that belief, their beliefs of who they are. People may have beliefs about who they are. For example, I'm really great, I'm really useless. Those are beliefs at identity level. And I personally would endeavor to, if assuming the client is open for this, to change limiting beliefs. I personally think that beliefs can change. Sorry, someone said something there. Okay, right. So I heard an echo. So I believe that beliefs can change if the client wants to change them. And sometimes beliefs will change anyway because of life's events. Now I'm going to use a very silly example in some way to illustrate this. And you know, this is not about a religious thing. So I'm Jewish, some of you know. When many people believe in Father Christmas until a certain point, and then they change their belief. So I think beliefs can change, and the change can be long lasting.
What are you saying, Jeremy, about Father Christmas?
Sorry, Mark. Any kids watching this any parents watching this recording, make sure their kids under about 15 or whatever, 10 don't watch it or block out this particular bit. Sorry, folks. And I know not religious wise, not everyone believes in Father Christmas, but you know, I'm just using that as an example. So I think it's really important, if possible, if the client is open to it, to change their belief. Now, I recognize that in some circumstances that may involve us as coaches or NLPs or change agents going quite deep. I'm not talking about getting into sort of psychotherapy. That is, unless you're a psychotherapist, you know, you don't go there. But with NLP and some coaches, that, you know, they've got techniques to help the clients to go deep, to change beliefs. Now, there may be situations where that's not possible because you may have just a 1 or 2 sessions with someone. And so you don't want to risk necessarily opening up a potential can of worms, or opening up something that you hadn't anticipated. So in that situation, I think it's useful to challenge beliefs, to reframe them. One of my mentors in my early days, Tad James, said, if a client comes into your office with 100% sure they've got the belief that's not helping them, and they leave only being 90% sure of that belief because you've done some reframing. In other words, if you've shaken up their limiting belief in some way, then I think that's a really useful thing to be able to do. another way of dealing with it, again, if you've only got a relatively small amount of time, or if you think it's not appropriate to go too deep, is to do what you said, Mark, to help the client to distinguish that it is a belief that they're running, not the truth. And I think it's a really important point about beliefs. When we have beliefs, we call it the truth. When someone else has a belief, we call it an opinion. And some people can't distinguish between their opinion and the actual truth. And so I think as coaches, NLPs, change agents, consultants, whatever you want to call ourselves, and this works at organizational level, not just individual, I think to be able to help the client to recognize their beliefs and to be able to manage, if by some chance they've got limiting belief and it's not appropriate to change it, to at least manage how they respond to it, to recognize, that's not really true. That's just my old belief again, my old belief kicking in, my old programming kicking in. Now I've distinguished it. Okay, I can pop that to one side from here. How do I want to be in this moment? How do I want to respond in this moment? So I think as coaches, NLPs, we have various options around that, from the full-blown belief change, the reframing. I know many techniques, by the way, to change beliefs, the reframing, or at least distinguishing that it is a limiting belief, and to help people to deal with it. This is really one of the best books I've read is and I'm looking for it on my bookshelf and I can't remember the name. It's by Esther and Jerry Hicks. I think it's called The Vortex. And these people deal very much in the idea of the law of attraction. Okay, so whether you believe that or not, I think it's worth reading the book, The Vortex by Esther and Jerry Hicks. And one of the points that Esther makes is that a belief is just a story you keep telling yourself. A belief is just a story you keep telling yourself. Now, whether you're telling yourself out loud or whether you're telling it in your head. I'm not good enough, I'm stupid, I don't deserve success, all that kind of stuff. So for people to be able to recognize that and tell themselves a different story might be useful. In fact, I think it is useful. Mark, does that answer your question? Okay, and what I'm giving you is my best current thinking, my belief about beliefs. I'm not saying it's the truth, by the way. Okay, so what I propose to do, folks, is there's about 20 people on this call, which is fantastic. Well, so delighted you're here. I'm going to pause the recording. I'm going to get the recording going. Thank you. I just want to get a sense of questions, comments, learning. I see, Dougie, you've got your hand up. So is that a question, Dougie, or a comment?
Yeah, I was kind of interested in hearing a bit more from Mark about what he was had in mind with the, hold our beliefs and they're part of who we are, and what, I don't want to put words in your mouth, Mark, but I hadn't thought about beliefs at all. I mean, obviously I heard Jeremy's response, but I just wondered what your experience was of sort of considering that rather than change beliefs, that you work with them. And just say a bit more about that, really. I thought it was, I hadn't heard it. I wasn't familiar with the notion of iceberg beliefs either. Is that just something, a belief you don't realise you've had until a circumstance presents it, tests it?
Yeah, so it could be, Dougie. For me, that kind of iceberg belief, an iceberg,
yeah,
only 1/10 is above the surface, 9/10 is below. It's a great metaphor for the human condition, as we know, because in terms of behaviours and actions, it's so much of it is below the surface, and it's the same with beliefs. We don't walk around stamped on our forehead what our beliefs are. We can only recognise them when they're actually situations that you're forced to confront them and make decisions as a result of those. So that's why I call them iceberg beliefs, and a lot of us don't know about them until we actually have to confront them and deal with them in terms of, okay, it's now, somebody's disrespected me, for example, and wow, I had a belief that everybody should be respected. And I mean, that's a very good example. For me, a personal belief is that respect is very important to me, and if I respect you and I expect respect back, and that's really useful, because when there's lots of respect there. You can get on with people, build rapport, be influential and persuasive. The downside of that, or, you know, I don't want to call it the dark side of it, is that if that respect is not coming back to me, I can be quite easily affronted or insulted and slighted and rear up quite quickly if I feel I'm being disrespected. And so, look, do I change that, or do I just acknowledge it and say, look, you know, there's some great elements of it, but just be aware of the darker side of it, or the more negative side of it, that sometimes what you're experiencing is a belief which might not be true.
Yeah, I mean, and I did wonder about that, this idea that the light and the dark side of a belief, that some beliefs can be useful,
Yeah.
but the very same belief can be detrimental. And it's almost like, I wondered if that's where you were going and saying, I've got this belief around whatever it might be, which sometimes can serve me.
Yeah.
But some situations in which it doesn't serve me at all, and I need to know that about myself.
Correct. So it's about knowing it. So here's another one: failure is a sign of weakness, which might be a belief that one could have. So the positive element of that is that, you know, I'm going to be determined. I want to achieve. It's going to drive me to achieve. However, there is a negative side to that, in that actually it might also mean I'm going to avoid taking risks or stretching myself. So acknowledging both sides of the positive and the negative just makes me more informed, so that I've got choices, and the choices might not always be comfortable, but I've still got choices.
Yeah. Thanks. Good point. No, thank you. And what I'd say also about that is sometimes beliefs and values can be quite closely linked. So Mark talked about respect, for example, or recognition. That, to me, that's a value rather than belief. And we will have beliefs about values, and probably values about beliefs as well. I think there's also sometimes we need to bear in mind the paradox. Paradox is that two opposing beliefs can be true at the same time, and to be able to work with that. So, for example, whether it's sport or business, someone may have a belief of, you know, I really want to succeed. It's important to me to succeed. So it's a value. And it's really important for me to succeed. And they may believe it's the most important thing right now is to win this match or to get this deal. And I think, yes, in the context of sports, it's important to win, or the context of business, to get this big deal is important. But I think we also need to remember that actually, if we step back and take a really big picture, is it that important that we win the match or win the deal? And I think I'm not necessarily into all different philosophies. I'm aware of one of the Buddhist philosophies of attachment versus commitment. So it's better to be committed to something rather than attached to it. Because if you're committed to it, you can totally go for it without the attachment. Whereas if you're attached, it almost, like in a sporting situation, it means sometimes people tighten up, or they're not in the flow. So to be able to work with the paradox that it's the most important thing, and yet it's meaningless, gives people freedom.
Buddhism, they talk about care and not care, which I think is what you're saying. Care and not care.
Yeah.
It's a paradox.
It's a paradox. And so if we totally care about winning a football match, tennis match, whatever it may be, and yet at the same time, we don't care, it gives us freedom. And I'm a tennis fan, and you watch some of the great male, female, whatever, in the big matches, they will go for their shots, even at match point. So they're totally committed, and both players are totally committed, and yet they know that one of them's going to lose. And often it's the one who can be more free and let his or her ability come to the fore that will actually win the match, or win the deal, or do well at the interview in the workplace. So I think there's paradoxes around beliefs as well. So I think, again, we could talk a long time about beliefs. I'm happy to answer more questions, but I just want to put that in the space, bearing in mind what Mark and Doug were asking. I think as coaches and NLPers, to be mindful of this, I think will help us to support our clients, whether they're, you know, sport, business, organizations.
And then Jeremy, sorry.
Go on, Mark.
That raises another interesting question around the kind of elephant traps of the mind and how that can impact on just the very things that you're talking about, performing with a degree of freedom. And that if you find yourself that internal, that inner chatter starts catastrophizing and which is only one step away from helplessness, or you start mind reading what other people's actions mean, or you start externalizing or personalizing what's happening in your world. Those kind of elephant traps can massively undermine that ability to be committed without being attached.
Sure.
Or to play with a freedom.
Sure, and that's where we come into the picture. That's what I think some of the real benefits that ourselves and people like us, people who do our sort of work, we can really help people, our clients, whether it's sport, business, life, to be aware. I think one of the key things that is really important to me in the work I do is to raise people's awareness, so that they can make truly informed choices to get the results they want. So if you think of the AIR model, so one of my marketing gurus many years ago said to me, "What do you actually do, Jeremy?" I said, "Well, I teach people NLP, and I coach." "Yeah, but what do you do?" And after about half an hour, it kind of dawned on me that what I do is I help raise people's awareness so they can make informed choices to get the results they want. So I'd call it the AIR model, AIR, which with a name like Lazarus is probably quite helpful, breathing new life into people. But anyway, that's another story. but the point is that I think that's what we all do. You know, in the work we do, we want people to be more aware of, you know, Mark used the example of the elephants, or the limiting beliefs, the internal chatter. Clients will have that, and they won't know they're doing it. For them, it's just the truth, or they're helpless. They don't know how to deal with it. And we, as coaches, consultants, trainers, NLPs, we have skills that can really help them. Francis, you asked earlier on, you know, I think you alluded to what keeps me going. Well, it's this. It's wanting to help people to get the kind of results they want in their life, personally, professionally. And I think most people, if not all of us, on some level, that's why we go into this world, into this kind of business world. Other comments, questions on that arose as a result of the breakout rooms and the breakout room conversations?
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned choice there, Jeremy. Our group, we started off with looking specifically at beliefs, but quickly we got into that conversation around the ecology of the whole practice, if I can call it that, in that, you know, we're all complex ecologies, and many beliefs, if not all, happen for a reason. There's a positive intent of them. And there could be a negative consequence potentially of offering a client more choices. So the two things that came up, themes that came out for us was, you know, it's about raising awareness, at the client's invitation, but ensuring the ecology of any intervention, any opportunity you're laying in front of a client, is for them to pick up if they want to. And that any potential negative consequences of changing that belief are well understood and cared for.
Yeah, it's a really good point. So I'm really good point, Nick. Actually, thank you. I think so. One of the guys I really follow a lot and spend a lot of time listening to is a guy called Dr. John Demartini. I really recommend you have a look at this guy's work, John Demartini. So martini is in the drink. It's all one word, Demartini. But I think he's brilliant personally. And he talks about there's always going to be two sides to a story. And if we're going to delude our clients that by achieving their goal, there'll be no negative consequences whatsoever. I think we're deluding ourselves as well as deluding them. A simple example, and I have her permission to use her name. I had a client a few years ago, some of you may have heard me talk about it, a lady called Jo, who was a triathlete, and she wanted to compete in an Ironman in Hawaii. Now, for those of you who don't know, the Ironman is a triathlon which finishes with a marathon. It finishes with a marathon. You do, like, I think it's a 2.4 kilometer swim, 112 kilometer bike ride, and then a marathon. All right, it takes about 10 hours to complete. And she wanted to do it in a really good time, so she took it really seriously. Imagine the amount of training time that's required to do that. So yeah, I get my goal and I get all these medals and all that, but what about the cost of achieving that? So for her, of course, she couldn't spend as much time working. She couldn't spend as much time with her partner. She couldn't spend as much time with her friends. Those were the inevitable downsides of her achieving her goal. And in having the awareness of that, she could then work around that. So she spoke to her boss and arranged I think she went to a 4-day week. She was an engineer, so a very successful lady, very accomplished lady in many ways. So she went to a 4-day week. Her partner happened to be a triathlete as well. So they trained together. They spent time training together. She said to her friends, look, I'm not going to see too much of you for the next few weeks or few months. When I get back from Hawaii, we'll have a great big party or a celebration. We'll go out. So she took steps knowing that there was a downside, but it was worth it to her to do that. If you think about any goal, if you're going to spend to achieve a goal, it's going to take some time, effort, and energy, which if you're spending time, effort, and energy on achieving X, it means you can't do Y. Because you can't, well, you want to spend time training, you're not going to be able to spend time with your friends or working. So I think to be mindful of this, and as you say, Nick, to question your clients as to, do you really want this? What are the consequences, positive and negative? And again, for those of you who studied NLP in the goal setting questions, what will this outcome get for you or allow you to do, which is positives, and, goal beyond the goal. What will you gain and what will you lose if you achieve this? And the questions of what will happen if you get it, what will happen if you don't get it, what won't happen if you get it, and what won't happen if you don't get it, are further ways to sort of drill down to make sure the client has considered the consequences of their action, of achieving the goal. Because it must be pretty disappointing for someone to go for a goal only to find a month, 3 months, 6 months, a year, 5 years down the line, it's not what they actually wanted in the first place. It's better to ask themselves those questions now than to wait to find out in the future. Nick, does that answer your point?
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome, thank you. Other questions, anything else arising from the breakout rooms before we go on to more questions? Richard.
Just a small curiosity here. So
thanks, John. By the way, thanks, John. Richard, sorry.
Where does NLP sit in the future? This is a NLP could be, and I've heard it said, it's just a set of tools. I've heard people say, I've had NLP therapy. So NLP sort of can be grouped in with the therapy world. I've even heard people talk about NLP as something partly spiritual. And NLP sort of sits in a gap in between those areas. I've heard people say that the best therapists are those that have NLP training. So could NLP just be a base set of tools that underpins other things? And yet what we've spoken about today is how important it is that to fulfill, if you like, the mission of NLP, if NLP has a mission, that it's all about wanting to do the right thing and help the client. So given that we're in a world where evidence and sort of double-blind trials and having ethical surrounding for everything that we do Where are we going to end up in 5 or 10 years? What will NLP be? Where will it sit in the panoply of techniques, tools, medicines, therapy? I don't know what it will, what the soup will be. It's a small, it's a quick question, so short sentence answer.
So Richard, can you tell me what the lottery numbers are going to be this Saturday?
I can have a good go.
You have a guess, 14 million to 1 chance of being correct. I know. Look, a couple of things. Firstly, where do I start with this? So NLP is an unregulated profession. You will find different people using it for different reasons, in business, in sport, in therapy, in coaching, in management, in personal development. It's a set of tools, and I don't think NLP. I interpreted what you said as being NLP says that you've got to help people and all that. When I talked about making a difference, I was talking about it's a personal choice of how we use NLP. Some people use NLP purely to make money. Some people use NLP purely to be better at something. So I think NLP is a really, when used effectively. Okay, no, let me step back. How's about this? NLP is a load of rubbish. I'm a master trainer of NLP. I'm telling you, NLP is a load of rubbish. Quality NLP is brilliant. Quality NLP can make a massive difference. And I think one of the problems that the NLP field faces, and I've said this in an open forums to the NLP Leadership Summit, is that the 7.8 billion people who haven't studied NLP don't know the difference between NLP and quality NLP. So I think where NLP is going to end up depends on whether the field can get its act together and have some kind of standards which the world can see and have confidence in. Thanks, Marjorie. And therefore, the world can have confidence in, and therefore the NLP field will become more recognized, because there are master's degrees that in NLP, which is brilliant compared to where it was 50 years ago. So there is evidence that it works. Could there be more? Yes. And I think it depends on whether that kind of NLP, quality NLP, continues to thrive, or whether it gets people just do the I'm going to be a bit judgmental here, the online 20-hour courses where for £10.99, where the trainer doesn't actually see you. Both sets of courses get certificates, but one you've been really well trained and assessed, and the other one you haven't, and there's everything in between. So I think my tip is to stay out the politics, and I endeavour to stay out the politics, to learn it and well. And there are some really great trainers. Even if you never train with me, there's really good trainers out there, and to go with good NLP and use it well for the betterment of yourself and the clients. So, Richard, that's my fairly brief answer on that. Yeah, I think where it ends up depends on the NLP field and whether we, at the leadership of the NLP field, gets its act together.
So to a degree, my question, your answer doesn't surprise me at all, Jeremy, because I've worked with you long enough. So to be a personal beacon of excellence is how I'd sort of summarize it quickly. But I guess my question was also alluding to that open question about where we are on that road to professionalizing and regulating the industry. I don't suppose you've got any update on it, if that's moved at all.
So in terms of professionalizing it, so as I've said, there is a master's degree that's at this moment in 2021 that's run by a company called Neurominds, which is run by Douglas D'Souza. in conjunction with Dr. Sally Vance, and some of you will know these names. And it's run in conjunction with the University of Wales Trinity St David. And there's postgraduate certificate, postgraduate diploma, and master's degree in neuro coaching, which is heavily NLP and coaching based. Okay, so that's that one level. There is, and there are other. I think there are some similar courses in other countries in the world. The leadership, there's an NLP leadership summit which meets every couple of years, but we have regular conversations. About 150 odd people who've been in the field for at least 15 years. There was a move to have an organisation called the Global Body of NLP, which was seeking to have standards of training throughout the world. I'm not sure where we are with that. I've lost track a little bit, but this was relatively recent, certainly within the last year. There are moves to make that happen. Whether it will actually happen or not, I don't know. But there are moves to say that if you're a member of this global body or the global organisation, you will sign up to a set of standards globally. Okay. I'm not sure where we are with that. So that's really all I want to say on that, Richard. Any other questions, folks, on anything you, okay, open phone, any questions at all on anything about coaching, NLP, business uses of NLP or business, any generally, leadership, management, sport, any questions? Hi, welcome.
You know, we just passed our finals and all the games finished. We learned many techniques how to work with athletes, but for the games, to get the result and to be a better player, you know, to find out their maximum peak performance. But then one thing happened, we lost on the finals, as we told you. What can we do? Okay, the pain losing on final, the last game, it's so much when you are losing. Seriously, players can't sleep. They see frames from the game, how they lost the ball, how they lose the game, etc. What kind of technique we can use to help them? Because to reach the peak performance, yes, we have many techniques. We have books, we are reading, but when everything finished, we did everything, but we lost. What is the technique to take them out from that situation, that psychological situation, actually, because it's really bad. They can't sleep. Okay. And it takes like 4 or 5 days to take them to real world. Everything finished actually 1 week ago, but they are still in the game and they know they lost.
So just to say for everyone, so Yeet and his, Yeet's, I think one of the coaches, and his wife is an elite volleyball player, I think it's fair to say, in another country. So I think there's a few things. There's so I think if I've understood it, the question is, players have lost in a cup final. They haven't necessarily played well, and it's really bothering them. They're losing sleep, and what can you do now?
Yes.
Okay. So here are some thoughts. One is to acknowledge the disappointment. Just to recognise it's a disappointment. I think to look at and have an honest conversation about what they can learn from this. To learn from the disappointment. To bear in mind that there is no failure, only feedback. And I know for professional athletes, it feels quite difficult for them to recognise that in the moment. But if they carry it around with them, it's going to impact them next year, or it risks impacting them. So it's so whether they have to talk it out and express their feelings, which isn't a particularly NLP way of doing it. I just think it's, in my experience, it's important to get it out there, to learn from it, to do so on the, I think for people to take their own responsibility for what they did and didn't do. And to set goals and to work together as a team, set goals and support each other, and to learn techniques so that if they get into a situation next time where they've got a cup final, to be able to learn how to manage their own emotions. Does that make sense? I'll come back to you in a second, Mark. Does that make sense?
A little too, because as I told you, the final game, we beat everyone, 100% success rate, winning rates, everything goes very well.
Yeah.
Last game, it's only 3 sets of game, and suddenly people start to shake.
Yeah.
Okay, we knew it. Thanks to you, we learned many techniques, and we were using for Yana.
Yeah.
And there was one more player that she was following us. Everything was good. You know, even in the game, in the sets when we were losing, we start to use that break states and, you know, to take them out of that situation and everything. But then suddenly it wasn't enough.
Yeah.
And then it happened, and disaster.
Yeah. So I think it also comes back to recognizing that sometimes, you know, it's commitment versus attachment. It's what I said before. So you can be totally committed to winning, and that's useful. To be attached to it, when people used to talk about shaking like a leaf, that says fear or attachment. And so, in my opinion, to be able to address that before the match starts, so that they all have the skills about anchoring, about visualization, mental rehearsal, about reframing, to have a recovery strategy. What happens if things don't go well? How are we going to respond then? So to have that already in place is really useful, but that's too late for the match that's gone. So right now, I think the best thing to do is for everyone, it probably has to individually and collectively to think about what they learned and what they're going to do differently. Let me give you a very personal example. And it's so I didn't play football at anywhere near the level that Yana plays volleyball. When I was 18, I played in the All England Jewish Cup final. Okay, so I played for a Jewish football team in south of England. We won our southern region. We had the final against the winners of the northern region. Now, believe me, it's nothing special, but at the moment, at that time, at 18 years old, it was a big thing. And we went up, basically, we lost the game 3-2. I playing goal, and all of the 3 goals were my fault. All right, just imagine that for a moment. I was 18 years old, and I felt terrible about it. It was awful. But I sat down and I thought, what happened? What led me to play so badly? And what it was, I got too excited about the match. I didn't sleep the night before. We went up to hotel and we were forced to go to bed at 11 o'clock. I wasn't tired. I'll never go to bed at 11 o'clock. So I stayed awake till 7 o'clock in the morning because I couldn't sleep. So the point is, I thought about that and I learned and I realized that anytime I had a big match, I had to distract myself. I had to do my normal routine. If I go out till 2 in the morning on a Saturday night, that's what I would do. So I learned, and now I'm not advocating everyone goes out till 2 o'clock in the morning. What I'm saying is that for people to learn from their mistakes. And even if you're not interested in sport, you can have the same thing in business, going for an interview, doing a presentation, doing a sales pitch. You get too psyched up about it, you're not going to, generally, you may not be able to perform as well. So learn from it. So I'm going to come to you in a second, Mark. Does that give you some thoughts?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay. Mark, was there a question or comment that you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, just to build on that, you know, like you, I've got some personal stories to share. You know, I played rugby union at elite level. I played at Twickenham 3 times in cup finals in front of 80,000 people,
Wow.
watched by millions on a telly. And I lost 2 of them. Well, not me, but the team lost. And, you know, it's hard. But what I learned from that process was you've got to think of the movie, not just watch the snapshot. The final was a snapshot, but what's the movie? Okay, and we spend too much time focused on the snapshot, which might have been a horror show, but actually we forget of all of the progress we make in the movie.
Yeah.
And so, as a suggestion, if I might be so bold, is to get the athletes to kind of start working on what I call a self-efficacy, this ability to pursue their goals, their dreams.
So, Jana.
Hi, I actually have a question about that. Maybe for both of you, or in a way for everyone. What Mark was saying, yes, it's very true. There is one problem with that. From my experience with my teammates, thinking in this way, reframing the situation, looking for the positive points of the loss of the final, it's great. But there is a problem that the players are faking and hiding behind this positive reframe. What I mean by that is when the coach or when the person that they are working with on their mental strength, their mental toughness, helps them to reframe their situation, they hide behind it and they are like, oh, okay, it wasn't that bad. So actually, maybe I don't have so much to fix. It's okay. I am hiding behind what was good instead of accepting that, like, okay, it was good and it wasn't enough. There is more to be learned. And the mentality of winning is actually something more than just reframing the loss.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a really good point, Jan. And what I'd say is that it is about I think it's about learning, but it's also about what are you going to do about it. So what are our goals next year? Both, and it's not just goals about winning, but it's goals about performance. And for those, many of you will know of something called performance profiling. So I think this is really important. So whether you're coaching in sport, whether you're doing work in the workplace, so what performance profiling does is it asks you to list the attributes of someone who's a good at any particular aspect. It could be volleyball, it could be tennis, it could be as a manager, it could be as a salesperson, it could be as a parent, actually, as a communicator. So you list the attributes, and then people rank themselves out of 10 compared for each of those attributes compared to someone who is excellent at what they do. An excellent salesperson, an excellent volleyball player, an excellent parent, an excellent manager, etc. And then you look at those scores and you ask yourself, okay, what do I need to do to improve those scores, to increase the scores? So it's not just about, I do hear your point, Jana, it's not just about saying, oh, well, I've learned something and therefore it's okay. It's okay, I've learned, but what am I going to do about it? How am I going to improve? How am I going to get myself in a situation where next year I will have learned and be even better as, in your case, a volleyball player, but for other people, it could be as a coach, counselor, parent, leader, salesperson, whatever particular skill that you're working with or that you're helping your clients with. Does that give you, Jana?
I don't mean to dismiss or anything like that, but I think this creates a great platform for me to mention one thing. So for everyone that is watching, I've been working personally with Jeremy for a year now. I am a professional athlete. And when I came to Jeremy, I had some issues that were holding me back in my career. And what we worked with, what he helped me with, it helped me overcome. And I've had a very successful year. So I want to thank him in front of everyone for that, for what he's done for me. And for you guys, maybe a little advice: listen, follow, because obviously he knows what he's doing, and I'm really grateful. And also, I saw Dougie was somewhere here. No, where did he go? I don't know. Yes, Dougie, hi. And Richard, with whom I did my NLP practitioner course. So I want to thank you guys, because really it made a difference in my life, both professionally and privately, but mostly professionally, of course.
Wow.
So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. So this wasn't planned, by the way. And this is why I do what I do. So thank you so much. It's a privilege, Yana. It's a real privilege. Thank you. Okay, there was now I think there was a question in the chat. About time management. Okay. Can I come to that a little bit? Time management. I'm going to come to that a little bit later. But there'll be the recording, so I'll give you some links as well. Are there any other questions about what we're covering in terms of coaching, NLP, or sports? Any questions?
Yeah, I've got.
Hi, Julius.
Hi. And thank you for sharing a volleyball story. I was quite intrigued by it as well. And the question I have is, I think you mentioned that you beat everyone convincingly to get to the final. And my question is, maybe were the opponents that you faced, were they more performance-wise better than you? If that's the case, then there is no failure, just feedback for you in terms of what can I do different the next time. And if that was in the case, then that's the question I want to find out in terms of going forward, whether you've considered those two questions,
Jan, if you could keep the answer fairly brief, or you, please. Sure. Thank you.
So the team that we faced in the final, the exact team 2 weeks, from the finals, we beat them twice, 3-0, and so easily. So this year we beat everyone, realistically, unreal. But when the final came, that team, that confident team, suddenly went somewhere in Japan that we couldn't find them. And then instead of them, there was 12 different girls. They never played volleyball. They start to act like first time they see volleyball ball. And what is this game, what we are playing, why we are here, why there is fans on the stands. And when the game finished, they became normal. They became again professional athletes.
And they started to cry.
And they are still crying.
No. I will just implement. The interesting thing is I'm sure some basics of volleyball. So it's 3-1 sets, right? So we won the first set. Everything is going really well, and suddenly something happens in the second one, which for me was the strange part, because it's as if they suddenly became afraid of their own shadow, and it's like, okay, let's take a mental break. Let's do this. Let's do that. But the eyes were empty. The eyes, they were gone.
And I think if I'm going to extend this point further, this is going to make it generally now not just about sport but about life. So sometimes people have a fear of losing, but sometimes people have a fear of success. And you may find that some of the people you coach or work with have that, and they may not know about it consciously. Mark talked about, we don't always walk around with our beliefs, or we're not always consciously aware of our limiting beliefs. So it's possible that somebody may have or a group of people may have a fear of success, because for some people, when they become more successful, it's like either they think they don't deserve success, perhaps, which is a limiting belief, or it could be that if they've got a belief that if I'm successful now, people will expect me to be successful in the future, which could put more pressure on them. Or from an identity point of view, one of you asked a question about identity earlier this morning. If you become even more successful in a particular area, your perceived self-identity may shift. Is this making sense, folks? So I think as a coach, as a consultant, a trainer, to be able to distinguish that for our clients, to help them to recognize that, and then to be able to respond differently, to change the way they believe about the fear. Because going back to your point, Yana, specifically, it may be that the thought of actually winning, maybe that they couldn't cope with the thought of winning. I don't know. I mean, I've never met your colleagues, but even if it wasn't the case for your colleagues, it can happen with people. So they hide. Some people hide. They won't push themselves forward, or they'll sabotage themselves. Because if they were really successful, what would that mean? What would be expected of them then? Or some other limiting belief that could be underpinning that. So again, just to be mindful, it's not just fear of failure, it can be fear of success. I want to move on. I've got a question from Kieran. Kieran sent in a question, and it's around motivation. So I think you coach really motivated people in sport and business. What NLP techniques would you use for someone who was lacking in motivation? So what I'd say about this is, again, I'm going to draw on some of the work from John Demartini. So John Demartini talks about the difference between motivation, or being motivated, I should say, being motivated and being inspired. Being motivated and being inspired. So if you think about, so inspiration comes from within. If we're really inspired to do something, nobody has to motivate us, because we do it spontaneously, without thinking about it, without being reminded, we just do it. Whereas if someone needs to be motivated, often that motivation comes extrinsically from someone else. Someone else has to motivate them. So I would want to get really curious. What is the person not motivated about, and what is that about? Because is it something they don't really want to do it, but they think they ought to do it? Are there lots of shoulds in there? And also, what does inspire them? Now, from an NLP perspective, this links to values. So if you find out what's important to someone, either in their work or in that particular context we're talking about, or in life generally, if you can find out what's important to someone, even if they're not motivated to do a particular thing or particular task, if they can see how by doing this task will help them to have what's really, really important to them, then that will motivate, that will inspire them, that will provide the inspiration to do this task that they may not necessarily want to do, but it's because of achieving the outcome. My guess is people, so Yana, using you as an example, my guess is you probably don't absolutely love when you're training, absolutely sweating and pushing yourself to the limit. You're not doing it because, oh, I love it when my legs really hurt. I love it when doing 100 sit-ups and my abs are really killing me. You don't do it because you love it. You do it because you want to achieve. That's what inspires you. And you're very clear on the link between this activity, being fit, for example, and being the best volleyball player you can be, and winning as much as and being the top scorer, etc. So if your client is inspired to do something, even if it's something, a particular task is something that they don't want to do, if you as the coach can help them to see that by doing this will help them to achieve this, to make the link, then that will help them to be even more motivated and inspired to do it. Kieran, does that, hopefully Kieran's still here.
Yeah, that's great, Jeremy.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, really good. Thank you. It ties in really well with a lot of the things from the volleyball we've been talking about as well. So yeah, thank you very much.
Okay. Now there is something I do want to add to this. If someone says they really want to do something, want to achieve something, and they're not taking action, one of the things that could be happening, and some of you have heard me speak about this before, is something called hidden competing commitments. Hidden competing commitments. And this is based on work done by Robert Kegan, that's Kegan. So Robert Kegan, I think, is a psychologist, I think at Harvard, or one of the major US universities. And he wrote an article in the Harvard Business Review, so it's very applicable to business as well as sports. Harvard Business Review 2001. I really recommend you get hold of a copy. So Hidden Competing Commitments, 2001 Harvard Business Review. And basically what he's saying is that if someone says they want to achieve something, but they're not taking action to achieve it, then the chances are that there's a hidden competing commitment. In NLP, we sometimes call this secondary gain, but there's something that they're equally committed to, but they may not be consciously aware of it. I think for us as, again, coaches, NLPs, trainers, consultants, to find out what is going on, what are they committed to? And the article gives you some questions, it gives you a structure of how to do that. So I'm not going to go through that, it's not in the top of my mind at the moment. But the article gives you a structure to go about doing that, and it gives some clear examples of how this has played out in the workplace. Okay. So what I want to do is just go into a breakout room for 10 minutes, just for you to discuss what we've covered so far this morning, what your takeaways are, what you've learned, and we'll be back in 10 minutes. So I'm just going to set the breakout rooms up, folks. Create. Okay, so you'll be in groups of 3 or 4. Okay, folks, see you back in 10 minutes. Okay, folks, welcome back. Welcome back.
Recording's on.
Thank you, Richard. Any comments or questions arising from that before we move on to sort of some of the topics around leadership and management? Any questions or comments from your breakout group?
I've got one.
Zahida.
Hi there. It was actually Simon that mentioned it. We were talking about analysing behaviour and moving on and thinking about the positives. And Simon raised the fact about actually you have to process and accept yourself, the situation that you've gone through and your feelings, and actually fully acknowledge that. Otherwise, you're always in this dynamic of trying to sort of move forward, but you haven't actually accepted how that's made you feel.
Yeah.
We sort of related it to grief a bit in our group. Actually, that processing is really key to be able to move forward.
Yeah, I think, look, I'm not a counsellor or psychologist, but my understanding is what you both said is correct, in that if we're not careful, we could just sweep stuff under the carpet and pretend we don't feel upset. Now, I think we sometimes have to acknowledge it, and I think it's healthy to acknowledge it as long as we acknowledge it in a healthy way, if that makes sense. So to recognise it, deal with it, maybe cry if we want to, maybe shout or scream if we want to, but then get it out of our system so we can learn from it and move forward. That's my take on it, basically. Thank you. Any other comments from your groups? Okay, so I can't can't remember the exact timetable, but I think we're due to move on to sort of the leadership type questions. So I've got a question here, I think from Nick Chalice. So thanks for sending some questions, Nick. Is there a predominant issue or issues that business leaders ask to address and have these changed over my 22 years of experience? If so, what are these predominant issues and how they change? So it's a really interesting question, Nick. Thanks for a nice easy one there.
Sorry.
It's really fun. So I mean, I think COVID obviously has put things into sharp perspective at the moment. I guess for some, right now, a lot of business leaders, their key priority is to keep the business afloat. I know some businesses are doing particularly well at this moment, and others are really struggling. But I think one of the changes generally I've seen over the past few years, not to, I haven't sort of counted whether it's 22 years, but the last few years, is the recognition that I think people are really, really, really important, and that people have choice. So I think with the millennials, you know, the view is that I don't have to stay in an organization if I don't want to. I'll go and find an organization which is in alignment with my values. And I think the idea of engaging staff rather than telling them what to do, I think it's been a big shift. And I was thinking about this last night, actually. A quick story. I remember when I did my degree, I did a sort of a sandwich course. I had a placement in a merchant bank in the City of London, very, very traditional merchant bank. And I was like, what? It was 1979, maybe 80, so it was a good few years ago. And I'm just an ordinary guy, right? Some of you know my background. You know, my dad was a cab driver, my mum was a hairdresser. You know, I went to grammar school, but I'm just an ordinary guy. And the phone rang, and it was one of the directors. I didn't know it was one of the directors. I said, oh, and I said, I just answered it and answered this question. 30 seconds later, he came into the room, and he came right up to my face, like right over me. I said, when you speak to a director, you say, sir, don't you ever not say sir to me again. He really went a bit mad at that. And like, could you imagine that happening now? I could not imagine that happening. And I mean, I know, Nick, you've got a military background. My understanding is that even now that there's a recognition of the importance of people. It's not just doing what they're told. There's an element of engaging people. So I think it's been one of the. Sorry, Nick.
No, absolutely. It's the misconception about the military is it's just people tell you what to do and you run off and do it. It's not about that, because you know when things get really challenging, it doesn't work. Command and control is the fast track to disaster.
Yeah.
Actually, empowered people able to think for themselves, and that was the genesis of my question. I think was, you know, we've gone from hierarchy to matrix organizations. The leader is no longer the person who necessarily is the most knowledgeable.
Yeah.
In all of the aspects of the business, is you know, that leadership has changed enormously, and I'm just wondering if that had percolated through to the sort of things that leaders were bringing you to say, Jeremy, help me with this.
In a word, yes, and I think it's also one of the big changes has been the idea of leadership development courses. One, there's a lot more leadership development courses, I think, than they used to be, and it's the emphasis is not so much on learning skills, it's more about learning who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And so the leader learning to lead themselves and be true to themselves as well.
Absolutely.
So I think that's one of the bigger shifts that I've spotted over the past few years.
Interesting.
And again, I think we can help people, we can help leaders to be more aware, more mindful, if that's the right word, have greater self-awareness of what they're about, which I think will help them to have greater understanding of and empathy for other people. And that's quite, in and of itself is engaging. If you've got a inverted commas leader, and the leader doesn't have to be at the top of the organization, by the way, as you were saying, Nick, if someone is being really true to themselves many people find that engaging, and they want to follow people who are being true to themselves. Yeah, so I think there's a lot more of that in the workplace and with leaders generally. So does that, Nick, does that give you some thoughts?
No, it does. Yeah, no, it's useful. It's useful. I mean, my mindset was changing. You know, when I left the military, when I read somewhere, I think it was Whitmore, that if you tell, you get compliance. If you ask the right question at the right time, you get commitment.
Yeah.
And it was such a simple expression that really, stopped me in my tracks and made me think.
Yeah.
And I just interested with your experience over 22 years in this business. And it's interesting that, yes, you have noticed that, and you're getting, I guess what you're saying, my words, not yours, but it's this ability to be a leader is more shaped now by a self-awareness and the ability, the willingness to show a soft underbelly, to admit when you don't know,
yeah,
to admit when you're feeling vulnerable. The old-fashioned way was that you couldn't be a leader if you did that. Now I don't think you can be a leader if you don't.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's almost like, if a leader can show his or her vulnerabilities, it gives other people permission.
Yeah.
To show theirs, because we're human beings, right? We've all got our stuff, our happinesses, our sadnesses, our strengths, our development opportunities, whatever your weaknesses, whatever you want to call it. So I think it's more relatable. If you're looking up at someone and he or she's showing their humanity, it gives you permission to show yours.
Yeah, I think we all just need authenticity in what we're doing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. Nick, you've also asked another question about how do I see things changing over the next 22 years.
Yeah. In business, yeah.
In business, I mean, I guess my view I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. I think one thing that I think will change, and I think COVID has brought this about, is that there'll be, obviously a lot more people are working remotely, working from home now. Well, I actually think that we could have a situation where it's an even greater situation where employees won't be even in the same country as each other. And I know to an extent that happens anyway, but I think companies will look to actually recruit permanent members of staff who work in other countries, because if people are going to be working from home, they could be anywhere. It's just going to be about, I think one of the challenges of leadership and management will be to be able to engage people from different cultures even more than they currently do. And I know the UK is a fairly multicultural country, but I think, to take it an even more global perspective. So that's just my sense, and I don't know what other people's thoughts are about that.
I can add in from the software industry, we were doing that. I mean, I was saying on one of the calls that this whole Zoom thing's not new. In the software industry, we had teams with Poland, Germany, Netherlands, India, America, all on a call 10 years ago. Only then we were doing it with telephone conference calls that were a nightmare. And the Zoom is a luxury, I have to say.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of it happening already.
Yeah. And particularly for, I think they're called knowledge industries, where it's not so much you don't physically have to do anything, like, in the supermarket, you've got to stack shelves, for example, and knowledge industries have been doing this for a while, and I think it will just continue.
And indeed, the need to have a more so everybody in a technology space, everybody is a leader in something, because almost everybody ends up specializing in a particular aspect. So we started from the point that everybody's a leader in something, and therefore needs to expect to be able to take the leadership in appropriate circumstances. And that's the way the whole company is organized.
Okay.
Could I mean, if I could just put it out there, I not necessarily have the answer, but you're tying those things together. And the reason I asked the question was that I think some industries, as Richard was just saying, are probably quite used to, or very used to, managing virtual teams. But it just strikes me that managing virtual teams is potentially very different to managing teams face to face, in person, because of we look for we intuitively look for body language, etc. There's a lot of communication, as we know, that isn't necessarily in the words; it's in how it's done. How do you motivate someone who's in Zagreb, or I was working, as you probably remember, Jeremy, with a team in southern India for a couple of years, and I wasn't always physically there. And I'm just wondering if developing those skills to motivate and lead virtual teams is fundamentally different to what we've been working on in the past, and whether there's going to be a greater call from more industries than just the high-tech industry as to how that's done. So it's just a thought. I haven't flushed that thought out yet, but that's really where I was going with it. Yeah.
There's work going on in that area. I can attest. It's been a lot of organisations have started to check out what the dynamic will be, and I think the issue seems to centre on the research they've done so far on onboarding and the need for an onboarding phase to build those connections, and then a periodic sort of face-to-face connection time. That's the research that's been going on so far. So I saw Fiona, you put your hand up on it as well.
So Fiona, I know you had your hand up. Is that something you want to say?
Is that me or someone else?
No,
yeah. Thank you. I was just going to say, I think that the move to remote, I've worked remotely for the last 5 years, and I've managed teams remotely, and I've also worked as an independent person remotely. And I think it feels really different, but in some ways it isn't that different. But it puts the emphasis on rapport, ability to build rapport and relationships, and what I would call a relational kind of skill set becomes a lot more fundamental when you're working remotely, because it is more about how you get that meaningful connection than it is what someone looks like or doesn't look like, because all you've got is that 2-inch square and you can't really see much that's going on in it. Yeah. And anyway, they can turn it off if they feel inclined. Yeah. So it for me, I think it is still using the same skill set, but it feels really different when you're getting used to doing it. Once you get used to doing it, then it also suddenly starts to feel more similar to how it was previously, but it's delivered in a different way. It's the same thing, but delivered in a different way is what I always say to people. I don't know if that's right, but that's how I found it.
That's my sense as well, Fiona. I think things like finding out that the values of each member of staff, what's important to them. I talked about values, I mentioned values earlier on, to find out what motivates them. And I think also with that, it's not just purely what motivates them about the work, but to have an understanding of their life generally. So, people have got very different living circumstances. Some people are in lovely big houses, some people are in small flats, some are living by themselves, some have got 5 kids and 3 dogs making noises. So I think it's about having that awareness of that, and then being flexible enough as the line manager or the leader to be able to, as long as the member of staff does their job, how they do it and when they do it, to an extent, is up to them. And I think as a leader or manager, to be able to support them and be flexible enough so that to empower them to do the work that they're there to do. I think that's really important. And to an extent, it was always like that. But I think it's just as Fiona was saying, it's a little bit different now because of the practical circumstances.
Jeremy.
Okay.
It's really interesting, everyone talking about remote working and managing a team of 9 individuals currently has been quite challenging. One of the biggest challenges I've had is when one of them suddenly lost a partner, and trying to help them remotely is just so difficult. And you just can't beat being in the same room with them, empathy, supporting them. It just doesn't work over Zoom.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm sorry to hear about that situation, and I guess it's got its limitations, and we do the best we can. And I don't, I don't know what other support might they need that either you or your organisation could provide, and those are, I guess, rhetoric questions. I don't know what to say to that then, obviously.
No, but it just shows we all continue doing our job, but that kind of connection just doesn't really exist. And it's great everyone's talking about globalization of workforce, but I think, you know, it's interesting. I can't remember a gentleman's name who worked in software. You know, I feel that collaboration and true kind of just out of the box thinking when you're in a room with someone is so better than being on a Zoom call. But I'd be interested in the gentleman that spoke about it, his thoughts on it.
Well, Richard, if you want to answer that, if you could keep it really brief, because there's a few other things I want to cover.
So when you have a bridge into somebody, a connection with somebody that's built on a relationship that's got elements of face-to-face from time to time, and when you've got tools such as, in the old days it was Yammer, and the big thing now is Slack and Microsoft Teams and God knows what else, it isn't just Zoom calls. And there's lots of one-to-one connections that go on. There are multiple teams. There's a project team delivering to a customer. There's a technology team, all sorts of cross-wiring going on. And then there's, you know, one-to-ones happening in depth. It's just the culture means that ends up being the case. So that is, it's not the same as, but you can end up in a reasonably good place. There's still, you know, that as I said, the research that was going on, I think it was in America, the big deficit was that onboarding phase where you build those bridges with intents. You know, somebody comes into the company, so you go down the pub or whatever, or have a meal, and you get a close connection with the team that you're working for. Those sort of things are harder to do in the same time span. So that's where they feel that the deficit needs to be recovered. The research that I heard about on the radio, and interestingly, it was done, I think, in Chinese companies.
Richard, if you could keep it sort of
sorry,
because we need to move on. So I know it's interesting.
They had two groups, one of which they worked one way, so it was like it was a sort of wasn't quite a double-blind trial, but it was quite a lot of evidence. So there are ways, but you do have to think more and work at it.
Okay, thank you, folks. I'm mindful of the time. We've got just under half an hour left. There's a couple of questions that I still want to answer. One is on time management. I think Christine, you raised that point about time management. And Sadaf, I think you had a question around fear of success. Are there any other questions that you want to kind of table up or, you know, put into the open? Any other questions, folks? Francis.
Yeah, I'm going to be brief because sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, I'm going to be brief because time is limited. So you've mentioned some key books. Thank you very much, Jeremy. But if there was any other key books you wanted to mention, that would be excellent. Okay. The other point was there any daily habits that you had taken on in the last 22 years that really stood to you and you could share with us?
Yeah.
The two other things was, very briefly, let me just ask you about trauma, because I know you've done the trauma training. You're very interested in the trauma training. Where do you see that going? That was the third question. That's it. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Right. So let me address the questions in the order that come to me. So Christine, you had a question. You raised your point about time management, I think. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about it. Well, so Christine, is there anything you wanted to say or?
Not really, no. I just know, I remember you giving some really good tips about time management based on Stephen Covey, and I just thought a refresh on that, and maybe your thinking, you know, your kind of updated thinking if things have changed over the last few years.
Okay, thank you. So basically, the simple thing is to go onto my website, And I've in the blogs, if you go to the top of the website, blogs, business and NLP, if you, it's on the second or third or fourth page, is taking control of your time.
Okay.
I would really recommend you have a look at that video. The reason I'm saying this is because in all the work I've done over the years, I would say it's particularly working with senior people in organizations. Time is a really important factor. And if you as a coach, consultant, trainer can help your colleagues or your clients to get really good at using time, you're doing them a massive service. What I found over the past few years is that I think since the financial crash in 2008, people have been asked to do more with less time, or more in less time and with less resources. So it's about prioritizing and really focusing. So I would suggest to save time on this call, have a look at the video. The video lasts between 10 and 15 minutes. There is an exercise for you to do, a couple of exercises that will take about 15 minutes each. So if you can do that, have a piece of paper with you, a little calculator. There's a lot of tips there about the practicalities of I guess, managing time effectively. The one tip about Stephen Covey, and it's from his book, I've got over here, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, is to put first things first. And what he means by that is to do things to spend sufficient time on things which are not yet urgent, but are really important, so that things don't become really urgent. So for example, studying or learning new things, or getting your car serviced rather than waiting until it breaks down. In the workplace, keeping up to speed with new software so that you know how to use PowerPoint rather than waiting until someone says, Jeremy, can you do it? Or Gavin or Simon, can you do a presentation in half an hour, please? And you're scrambling around trying to learn how to use PowerPoint. So it's knowing in your particular role what's important but not yet urgent, and spending sufficient time there before it gets urgent. Okay.
Thank you.
Christine, does that address your point, your question?
It does, thank you. Yes, I will look at those resources. That's really great. Thanks very much.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Sadaf, I think you put something in the chat about fear of success.
Yes, it comes up for me a lot, but I'd like to know from your perspective, did you fear success in the 22 years? And if you can just give some tips on that.
Not consciously. And maybe I don't know, maybe I did unconsciously, but although I suppose at the start there was a little bit of, can I really put myself out there? And I think when I wrote my first book, that was a major thing for me, getting my name out there. But I'm not consciously aware of fear of success. But what I say for other people, for your clients, people you work with, most of the stories we tell ourselves are not true anyway, especially the limiting belief stories. So most of the things we think, most of the inverted commas bad things we think are going to happen, probably aren't going to happen. And if they do, we'll deal with them at the time. So it's one thing to be prepared for things to go wrong, but it's another thing to assume they're going to go wrong. So by being successful, the fact that people may expect more from you, okay, deal with it. The fact you're going to be successful may mean that people will want more of your attention. Okay, accept that, deal with it. If that's what you really want, if you really want to achieve certain things, things are going to change. And it's about being able to adapt to those and to work with the inevitable changes of life. Does that make sense, folks? Any questions on that?
I just wanted to add, like, sometimes when you have a goal and you achieve it, when you become successful, you're still in denial that you've done well. I think I have some of that baggage, and I agree with you that you need to adapt. I think there's just one more thing I wanted to say, was that getting published is a biggie, definitely, for a lot of us. Publishing a book, because I think that's a really big goal that a lot of us have.
I know people who've been writing a book for years and years and years, but they haven't taken that final step to press the button to get it published. Now, whether that's because there's a limiting belief, or they think it's got to be perfect, or who knows. And if you and so there's lots of reframes around that. Years ago, I met. I just got talking to a woman. She's a really smart lady, and she said, "Go for it in life, because you'll never get out of it alive anyway. So we might as well go for it. We're born, we die, and it's up to us what we do in between." So I know sometimes to really go for things, it can be challenging. To really go for it, you put your heart on the line. Sometimes you really go for it, and you risk it not working out. That's part of the game. That's part of the game of life. And I think if we can see, I know this is not meant to sound flippant. I'm giving you my thoughts. You take it or leave it. If we can see game as a life, see life as a game. We see life as a game that we are playing, then we can choose how much we want to, how much you want to really go for it. We know that, Jana, you play sport, you know you're going to lose certain matches, right? It's part of the game, we know it.
Yeah.
So if we're going to be scared of losing a game of volleyball or tennis, or not getting a job, or not getting a client saying, a client may say no, what kind of life's that going to be? Get out there, go for it. Jana, please.
So for me, in sports, right, the results are very immediate. So I get the feedback right away. And for me, one of the biggest discoveries was being committed to the success, even though I don't know if I'm going to win or fail, is actually the difference that pushes me forward. All right. So if I give my best and I fail, okay, I get a feedback. But if I don't give my 100% and fail, it means I'm just hiding. I'm being stuck on the same spot because I never tried. So there is no feedback to get because I didn't do anything.
Yeah, exactly. So if we give it 100, and it's tough, you give 100% and you don't win. And sure, going back to, I think it was Zahida's point about, and Simon acknowledging that, you're upset, you're disappointed. Okay, so what? We're disappointed, so what? We can still move forward. So it's a bit of my, philosophy. Hopefully it's useful. Go for it. Help your clients to go for it. It's much easier to give it 100%, even though it's hard and it's tough. And so you get towards the end of your life and you can look back and you say, I've given it my best. I've really gone for it. I've got no regrets. So, the Frank Sinatra song, I did it my way. Rather than not really putting yourself out there, hiding a little bit, as Jana was saying, not giving it 100%, thinking you're taking the easy road. But you get to a certain point in your life, whether it's 60, 70, 80, 90, whatever it may be, and you look back and you think, oh shit, I could have done even more. I could have given it just that extra bit. I held back a little bit. And that's tough. That's really tough, because it's too late to change it. What's done 40, 50 years ago. So in summary, take the hard road, because in the long run, it's easy. Rather than taking what you think is the easy road, because in the long run, that's hard. Does that make sense, folks? Okay. So, couple of other points. So coming back to, I think, Siddharth, does that, it may not be a full answer, but does that give you some thoughts?
That's a good start for me. That's a good start. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So coming to Francis's questions about key books, I mean, I think it depends on what topic. I mean, one of my favorite books ever, actually, and it's the only book I've read 3 times, is Conversations with God by Neil Donald Walsh. And it's not a religious book, by the way. Conversations with God. Get book 1. Get book 1. Start with book 1. And it's a philosophy, it's a book on philosophy, basically, but a really practical philosophy of life. And I think there are a lot of universal truths in that book. And one of the things that the book talks about is, and I'm just repeating, I don't want to get into religion and stuff like that, but you know, the idea that God is allegedly saying that he's given us free choice. The purpose of life is basically to find out who we really are and to go for it, and to experience life, to treat life as a playground, to go and play and explore and develop and learn. Okay, and apologies if I've mis-summarized that book. So Francis, that's what I'd say. A book I don't often mention, that particular book. That's one book I would suggest. In terms of daily habits, I clean my teeth every day and all that kind of stuff, but I assume you mean other sort of non-hygiene habits. One thing I started doing a few years ago was to keep at the end, I've got a little diary where I write at the end of each day 10 things I'm grateful for that day. And as you'll know, for those of you who studied NLP, if we start looking out, if I know if my unconscious mind knows I've got to find 10 things to write that I'm grateful for, guess what? My unconscious mind starts searching for that, and I find things I'm grateful for. And I keep it to things that I'm grateful for that don't in any way upset or disadvantage other people. So, for example, some of you know I'm a Tottenham Hotspur fan. So if Spurs, by some miracle, happen to beat a football team, I don't write that in my diary, because that is in some ways upset someone, the fans of the other team. But it could be big things if I've won a contract, or if I've seen a beautiful butterfly. So to write things that I'm grateful for that day, and it's like gratitude. The more grateful you are, the more things you have in your life to become grateful for. As far as to answer your question about habits, in terms of trauma work, so for those of you who don't know, there's a relatively recent development in trauma treatment. It's called the reconsolidation of traumatic memories, and it's a protocol. It's brilliant. I think it's brilliant technology. And the question is, where do I see it going? Well, I'm not that close to it, but I know there's evidence out there. I know there's a lot of work being done in the States in particular to help publicize this. So I actually think that will become more and more popular. I think now there's, obviously with first responders with COVID, for example, there's a lot more demand for trauma treatment. So I believe and I hope that it becomes more widely acceptable and widely known. Folks, it's 10 to 12. We've got 10 minutes left. What questions do you have that I haven't yet answered? Coaching, NLP, sport, selling, business, management, the sort of work I do, anything that I deal with in my work. David.
After your 22 years successful coaching life, what advice would you give to people starting out in the coaching world?
Okay. So the coaching world has shifted quite a lot from when I started. When I started, very few people knew what coaching was, so you didn't really need to have a niche. Now, I think it really helps to have a niche. Doesn't mean you have to stick to the niche, but if you're known as a coach for a particular area, of course you can do related stuff, but for marketing purposes, it's much easier to identify and speak to a particular niche. And one of my marketing gurus said, ideally, the niche should be an inch wide and a mile deep. In other words, very narrow with lots of people in that niche. So ideally, someone from your target market would be able to read your website, your literature, your articles, whatever it may be, and say, wow, David is talking to me, or Julius is talking to me personally, or Gavin is talking to me, or Kamal is talking to me. Do you get the point? So I think to niche, I think to learn, to become as good a coach as you can be, recognizing that whether you've done it, 22 years or 22 weeks or 22 months, whatever, there's always more to learn. Particularly if you're going to work inside organizations, I think to get a meaningful coaching qualification so that there's credibility with your audience. And it's a paradox. If you've got qualifications, normally people won't ask for them, but if you don't, people will. And in some organizations, if you're tendering for work, or some HR departments need to see it just so they can tick a few boxes, which is absolutely fair enough. Those are key points, and just to go for it, to really go for it. If it's a passion of yours, something you want to do, just absolutely do it. I personally believe that there is a demand, and an increasing demand for our kind of work. I think somebody asked a question, and I've made a few notes on it. I think going back, say, 20 years, relatively few people had coaching. I think nowadays more and more people are having it, and it's not just for senior people. I think it's people in sort of middle ranges in organisation, middle management. And I think one of the shifts from COVID will be that organisations will want their employees to be coached, or to offer them coaching to help them to be more effective and to deal with the challenges that have been faced. So I think there is scope for us as coaches to win more work. David, does that answer your question?
Yes, great. Yes, thank you, Jeremy.
Any other questions, folks?
I've got a question on marketing, Jeremy. Because I remember doing one of the training, you mentioned how marketing is very key in terms of launching a business, and I took on board some of the tips that you get, like funnel and stuff like that. But in your experience to date, if you give us, I'll be greedy and say 2 marketing tips. That would be really amazing. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm not a marketeer. I want to be really clear on that. One tip would be to get really good at marketing.
Okay.
So go on courses, read books. If your market is digital, if you think your market is going to be based on digital, so like the Facebooks and the social media platforms, get really good at that. But also to remember that sometimes the old-fashioned ways are really good, like writing articles, meeting people. One way to build your network is to find, I'm giving you more than 2 tips here, Julius. You got one here. One way to, and this is a tip from one of my colleagues, one way to build a network is to find someone who's got a big network.
Okay.
So find people in complementary but not competing industries, and get in touch with them, especially if they've got big networks, to see if you can collaborate with them.
Yes.
Okay, to tap into their network for an affiliate commission. Often happens. Write articles. Yeah, just get out there, and I think also to build a database. It took me a long time to really get my head around that. So when you pick up people's business cards or whatever, obviously with GDPR you have to ask permission for them to be on your database. But to build your database and keep them in touch with them, give them useful stuff. So that's what I would say. There's probably more than Julius.
Yeah, thank you, Jeremy. That's really helpful. Yeah.
Any more folks? Any other questions?
I did put one in
the chat.
Christine, I did put the managing stakeholders. I don't know if that's something you have any say podcasts or blogs or anything on that.
On managing stakeholders, I haven't got any blogs on that. What I'd say is taking your. You mean coaching someone to manage their own stakeholders? Is that what you mean?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So there's something called a technique in NLP called perceptual positions, which is seeing different perspectives. And many of you wouldn't know about this. So what I would do is to do an exercise where I would get my client to step into the shoes of the different stakeholders, the main bodies of stakeholders. There could be 5 or 6 different groups. Shareholders, customers, suppliers, etc. To step into the shoes of each of those and to really see it from their perspective. What do they want from the client, whatever? So supposing if you were my client, Christine, I would find out the key stakeholders in your business or whatever. I'd put you into the shoes of, let's say, a customer. Say, right, customer, looking at Christine, what do you want from her? What don't you want from her? What do you want to say to her? So you kind of I would facilitate that conversation, and then I would take you out of that one and put you into a supplier perspective, looking at Christine. Okay.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Really helpful. Thank you.
And the other thing with that is, if it's feasible for your client to actually speak to the stakeholders or a selection of stakeholders and ask them straight what's important to them, what do they want, what do they look for from the client, to find out their values. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
I make it 11, or Microsoft makes it 11:59. And whatever the equivalent time is in Tokyo or any other country that you happen to be in. So I really, really want to thank you for being here. And I know some people have had to leave. I want to thank everyone who's participated. My request, a couple of things really. One, if you haven't already, please donate the £22 to your local food bank. I'm not going to, you don't have to confirm it to me. I just trust you. Please, if you'd like to, please do that. I'll send out the link to this recording. If you want to watch it through, feel free to do that. The other thing I want to ask is have the best life you can possibly have. Go out and have a really gorgeous life. However gorgeous is for you. Okay. Folks, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Nice to meet you all.
Thank you so much.
Yes.